Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever at San Diego Comic-Con, please welcome three-time Oscar winner Oliver Stone.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dave Karger. It's my absolute pleasure to be here for the sixth time in Hall H. And let me tell you, over the last 5 years, I've done some cool things with you all. I've interviewed the whole cast of Catching Fire with you. I've played Getting to Know You games with Charlize Theron and Kristen Stewart. And I've led you all in singing Happy Birthday to Daniel Radcliffe. But I've never been able to introduce for the first time an Academy Award-winning filmmaker at his debut appearance at San Diego Comic-Con. So welcome. Oliver, when you envision this moment, walking out here on the stage, and then when you think about what just happened, did they line up, your expectations and the reality?
Yes. No, it was nice. It's nice to see a memory, history. I'm a fan of history.
Good. Well, speaking of being a fan of history, we're here to talk about your new film, Snowden. And listen, you're known as being someone who likes to tackle politics in your films and to tackle conspiracies in your films. Do you feel like the story that you tell in Snowden, given it talks about the fact that the government may have been surveilling all of us, this isn't about one person being assassinated or one person being elected, do you feel like this is the ultimate conspiracy story for you to take on?
I hope not, but if there's larger ones, I think we're going to have to go back into it. But right now, this is Snowden is a larger-than-life story of what's happening right now under our noses and continuing to happen. And it affects the majority of you, this audience, into this next generation.
The story of Edward Snowden has been well told. There's been countless interviews, articles. There was a great documentary called Citizen4. What did you want to add to the story of him with this film?
Well, he's still a mystery. We went as far as we could. He cooperated with us. We went over there several times. We went by the public record. There was a wonderful book written by the Guardian journalists, and I spoke to the journalists who were there with him in Hong Kong, and as many people who would talk to me, including the lawyer who was in Hong Kong. So we got as far as we could, whether, we leave it to the realm of dramatization. This is what we had to do. We had to, there are things that we don't know, and things that he will one day, hopefully, reveal in a book of his own.
Well, speaking of books, this film is based on two books. I'm curious as to what the process was for you as far as getting the permission to do this story, besides getting the rights to the books. What conversations did you actually have to have, if any, with Edward Snowden to get his blessing and his permission? I
met him for the first time in late January of 2014. I was in Moscow, and his human rights lawyer, Anatoly Kucherena, had written a novel, a fictionalization of his story, like somewhat in the vein of 1984 by Orwell. And we purchased that book as well as the Guardian book. And over the period of, let's say, three more meetings until May, it was cat and mouse, getting to know him trusting this process. He was not particularly interested in a movie, but as the months went by and we got to know each other better, and I brought in a co-writer who we very much liked, Kieran Fitzgerald. It came together in May, June of that year, and then we wrote it and went to work. The screenplay was a nightmare of complication, how to simplify it, how to keep it interesting, make it exciting, a thriller. And by February of the next year, we were shooting, and we kept revising the screenplay through the process of shooting, into the editing, in fact, as I tend to do.
Did you get the sense in your conversations with Ed that he was very familiar with your work, a little bit familiar with your work, or not at all familiar with your work?
I can't tell. He'd seen part of History, Untold History of the United States, was a documentary, and been apparently impressed with it. And, he's a man who's covert. He keeps to himself. He's very inner, lives on the computer. I met him all the time under conditions of secrecy. And I found him to be going through a painful period, and I found him to be very resolute and very strong. You realize he was only 29 years old when he did this enormous thing, and at 29, I could never even come close to imagining it. But he's paid for it in a big way, and I've seen him over a period of almost 2 years now, and he's never wilted in the face of the opposition. He's gotten stronger, and he stays very much in touch with the reform movement on surveillance, with many contacts in Europe and the United States and Asia, and he talks to them consistently.
And my understanding is that this was not an easy project to get funded. Why was it so hard to get money for this?
You tell me, Dave. It was, frankly, it was turned down by every major studio. The script was good, the budget was good, cast was good. It was definitely, what you call it, self-censorship. I don't believe there was an enemy such as the NSA lurking in the background. No, I don't. But definitely self-censorship is a huge issue in this country, and it blocks so much of the truth from coming out. And every studio, every corporate board that runs the studio, more than the studio people, said no. And it was hard. France, Germany were the major contributors, as well as Open Road, which is bringing the film to the United States, which is a fine distributor. It had Spotlight last
The reigning Best Picture winner, Spotlight.
Yeah. So we're lucky to have them, and foreign sales.
Well, before we bring out your three cast members, my understanding is that you have something you'd like to introduce and show this audience. So please do the honors.
I'd like to introduce the new trailer, which is coming out same day, today.
First of all, the busiest man at 2016 San Diego Comic-Con, Zachary Quinto. Shailene Woodley. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Joe, this way. Come closer.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Joe, let's explain the choice of T-shirt today.
Sure. Well, a word that gets brought up in these conversations a lot is the word patriot. And I think actually I'm sitting next to one of the most patriotic filmmakers in the history of American cinema. And that's a lot to do with what this story is about, because being a patriot in the United States, to me, is not just about unquestioningly saying that everything is good. If you love something and you see something wrong about it, you raise your hand and you talk about it and you try to fix it. And that's what I think his movies have done for decades. And I was really proud to be invited into one of his films.
Joe, I've seen the movie, and it's so impressive. And it sounds trivial and small, but I think the voice of Ed Snowden, the actual voice, is such an important thing because we've heard it, all of us, so many times in interviews. How did you get to a point where you felt like you had nailed it?
Well, thanks. I ripped a bunch of audio off of Citizen 4, the documentary you mentioned earlier, as well as lots of interviews and stuff, and just put it in headphones and on repeat. But I remember the day early on when we recorded first some temporary voiceover, and there's a certain threshold sometimes you cross. You're like kind of working on a voice, but I didn't want to try to do it in rehearsals because you don't want to do it halfway. And the first time I think you really heard me try to do it all the way, we were recording this temporary voiceover, and he can be very subtle. He was like, "Oh, you sound like him," and I was like, "That's a big compliment from Oliver." And yeah.
What's the trick to doing the Ed Snowden voice?
Oh
Can
man,
you teach us?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, it's just listening to it over and over again sometimes. Me personally, I don't try to analyze it too much because then you're thinking about it, and you don't want to be thinking about that when you're acting. So that's why it's just a lot of repetition, and hopefully it kind of just seeps in by osmosis, and you don't have to think about it.
Shailene, you have become very politically active in the last couple of years. What came first? Your interest in politics as they are today, this film, did one kind of lead to the other?
I wouldn't say one necessarily led to the other. I actually have never been very politically active before this election. But this movie, I mean, I found out that they were making it, and I wanted to, first and foremost, just thank Oliver for making this movie. I remember, it's so important and it's so relevant. And being someone who was, and I was in my early 20s when Ed released all of this information and he did what he did, it had a profound impact on my life. For someone to be brave in his intent to educate people, regardless of whether you agree with it or not, to release information that he felt was going to empower people to know what was going on behind the scenes, it's something that you kind of always suspected. You're always joking around, like, I wonder if they're watching us. And then to have it sort of confirmed like that, it really opened my eyes to policy in a way that I'd never thought about before.
Zach, I'll never forget the first time, as the story was breaking, the first time I saw Glenn Greenwald, who you play, on TV doing an interview, and I was just very impressed with how brilliant he is, but also I thought to myself, this guy is tough. Yeah. I mean, he's not going to smile through an interview or really any situation if he doesn't feel like he wants to. What was that like to play? Because in many scenes, this guy is a hard ass.
Yeah, he's so relentlessly committed to adversarial journalism in such a pure way. It's really impressive, and he's so intelligent, like you say, that he backs up every position that he adopts with such clarity and such unimpeachable knowledge. So I feel like it encouraged me to raise my own bar of awareness of this world. I was so grateful to be able to be brought into it because I agree with everything everybody said, how important it is. He's a pretty remarkable guy, and luckily there's no shortage of videos and interviews and debates, and he puts himself out there for what he believes in, and I have a lot of respect for that.
Oliver, you joked a couple minutes ago that you didn't think the reason that you couldn't get money for this was because of the NSA, but the fact is you did decide to shoot this film not in the United States, you shot it internationally. What was the reasoning behind that? Were you at all afraid that there would be some people looking at you, checking in on what you were doing?
I just don't want to have confusion arise in case they did not interfere with us, and I have no knowledge or suspicion that they did. The problem is, in this world, how can you tell who's listening? I do very much feel the 1984 Big Brother vibe. I feel that in general in this society, and I don't think any one of us can be innocent about that. So we all kind of curb our behavior to some degree. We don't go to our favorite internet porno sites and so forth and so on. Or some people may not even go to their favorite investigative journalism sites, which is very serious. Unfortunately, it changes the tenor of the whole thing, but I don't know, and neither do you. The problem is that Moritz Bormann, our producer, wanted to go to Germany. He's Germany, and he knew we had subsidies waiting for us there and a friendly climate. Look what they've been through since World War II, the Stasi in World War II, or the communists after World War II, and the Gestapo during the war. So they had a respect for privacy really strong, and they're big supporters of Snowden. So we went there, French money and German money. But I don't know the answer. Do you have an idea, Joe?
Of why we shot in Germany instead of the U.S.?
I'm talking about what he asked about the NSA.
About surveillance? I agree with you. I don't think that the NSA is necessarily proactively trying to stop us from making a movie. It's something more kind of complicated and subtle than that, and it's what Oliver's talking about is you won't necessarily notice how you change your behavior if you know you're never alone. But I really value being alone sometimes. I get a lot of thinking done when I can, talk out loud and know that no one can hear me. And that's, I think, important. It's an important part of being a human being. And I know not everyone feels that way. I know some people really don't care whether they have moments of privacy, and I respect that as well. Some people post all day long about just, where they are or what they're eating, and if that's what you like to do, then that's perfectly fine. It's not my personal preference. To me, the question is not whether you need privacy or you don't need privacy. The question is that we're promised privacy in the Constitution, and if the government was going to change those rules, then they have to be open about that. And that to me is actually even more important than the questions of privacy or mass surveillance in the Snowden story, is the question of government transparency. We can have an open debate. Some people will think that we should have mass surveillance. Some people will think that we shouldn't. That's what a democracy's supposed to be, is we're all supposed to have that conversation and decide together. The problem was that decision wasn't made out in the open. The rules were broken kind of in secret and then lied about, and no one could prove that there were lies going on until Edward Snowden provided that evidence.
I'm assuming all three of you met the... Yeah. All three of you met the people you play in real life? And if so, what were those meetings like, and what did you glean?
I actually met Glenn not in conjunction with this movie. I had met him before I even knew that, before this whole thing happened, actually. And we didn't have a chance to connect personally, but I refer back to the fact that, there's so much writing and expression that he's put out there that I didn't have any shortage of material to dive into to get a sense of his character and his perspective. And one of the most interesting points that I think he makes in general is this idea that, like, so many people adopt this attitude that, well, I have nothing to hide. So it becomes this insidious kind of atrophy of the mind, right? Because yeah, it's fine if you don't have anything to hide. If they're looking at you, they're not going to pay any attention until such a time when attention from their perspective should be paid, and then they have all this trove of information to go back to. So it's like the vigilance is the thing that I think this argument diminishes, and that exposes us all collectively and expresses a kind of vulnerability that we shouldn't be subjected to, So I feel like, his work is the thing that I leaned into, and his point of view. I hope we get to connect. I want to go down to Brazil and hang out with him down there.
That would be nice.
Totally.
Shay?
I met Lindsay Mills, Ed's girlfriend, when we were filming in Washington, D.C., about 3/4 of the way through the movie. And it was an interesting experience. I've never played anyone who was a real person, let alone still alive today. And I felt a certain pressure when we started. We sort of based the character around what we knew from her past social media sightings and things that we knew about her career life. But in a lot of ways, Oliver and I had to come up with who she was outside of who she actually is, because I didn't know her. And when I met her, I remember thinking, dang, I wish I had met her beforehand, because there was small mannerisms or there was quirks that make her unique and make her who she is that I would have implemented into the movie. But it was a trippy experience. For me, I wanted her approval. I wanted her to know that I was trying everything I could to pay homage to who she is as an individual, and just kind of pray that I did a good job at it.
Joe? And I'm also curious, logistically, how does one get to meet Edward Snowden? What do you have to do to be in the same room with him?
Well, I went to Moscow. Oliver and Kieran, the co-writer, and I all went to Moscow. And I got to sit with Ed, and Lindsay actually was there also, for 4 hours, and that was the first time I met him. The funny thing is, one of the first things he asked me was, all right, so Lindsay and I, we have a dispute going. Is it hit record or hit record? And I was like, it's both, dude. Thanks for asking. But no, we sat and talked for hours, and It's interesting because I think most people that sit down and talk with him are really approaching him from the position of politics. I was trying to get to know him on a different level because I can read about his politics. I wanted to just kind of understand who he was. We got to sit down and have a meal. I think you can tell a lot about a person just by like how they are when you sit and eat with them. And he's very polite was one of the first things I noticed. He's from North Carolina, and there's a lot of emphasis put on good manners, I think, in the South, maybe more than from where I'm from in California. And I think that's actually really charming. He's very much kind of an old-fashioned gentleman almost in that way. Really warm and an optimist. That's the other thing that's, I think, really funny is, he's sort of known for raising his hand about some of the downsides of what technology can be. He's actually extremely optimistic about technology in the future and how technology can improve democracy and improve the state of the human race. And I love talking about the future. So we had a really good time.
How badly did you want to do your Edward Snowden in front of Edward Snowden?
I didn't have it then. I was still developing it. But no, because I've talked to him since. I haven't been back to Moscow, but I've talked to him since several times over video chat since he's seen the movie. And I have been dying to ask him, like, so, is that cool with you? I haven't asked him.
We'll take care of that in a little bit later
Right.
today. One thing I found so fascinating about it is I knew nothing really about his personal life. I didn't know he suffered from epileptic seizures, which we learn in the film. I didn't really know much about the relationship between Lindsay and Ed. For the three of you, Oliver and Joe and Shay, was that something that was particularly interesting to explore, given that it was something that many people don't know?
For me, it was crucial, and we put an emphasis on it in the script, because without Lindsay in his life, he doesn't have any friends. He really doesn't, and he's not close to his sister, he's not close to his mother or father. So he lives in this world of a computer world, inside that, and I think that's his link to the rest of us, and I think that's the reason, one of the main reasons, besides the epilepsy and various things that happen in the movie, one of the main reasons he did this radical action.
What about you two?
I thought it was interesting because we all know the narrative of Edward Snowden as mass media wants us to know the narrative of Edward Snowden. And I felt like the opportunity to know him as a human being, to know him outside of his policy, outside of his job, outside of his headlines, was crucial because it's really easy to forget that people who make decisions they make are still human, they're emotional creatures, and they still experience a human life. And Lindsay was a big part of that in our dialogues and our talking with one another. You see a certain side of someone when you see them in love, when you see them in a relationship, and I felt like that was an important piece to share with the world of who Ed is.
When I was watching the movie, Oliver, one thing I was thinking to myself was, I don't know if you've made a film before that is going to speak so clearly to a younger generation than this one. Is that something that you were thinking about at all when you were putting it together or making it, or even now?
Well, it comes with the territory. I mean, everyone in the movie, except for 2 or 3 people, is less under 30, right? So you got to find actors who are about that age. So I was very lucky to find 2 young people who were erudite and could address their generation. There are times I was lost. I don't understand some of the things that were going on in this new generation. But that's the way it goes. You learn as you go.
Joe, where did your money from this movie go? I've read certain things.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't buy a house, necessarily.
I donated the acting fee from this movie, and part of it went to. We're doing a production with my company Hit Record in partnership with the ACLU, a series of videos about the themes of technology and democracy. And on Hit Record, we always paid the artists who contribute. So part of the fee went to that. and the rest went to the ACLU, which, if you don't know what that is thanks. The ACLU, it stands for the American Civil Liberties Union. They're a 100-year-old legal organization that's been fighting for civil liberties and sticking to the Constitution for a long time. And they're really at the forefront of all these issues of online rights and digital privacy. And they're doing great work. And so I was happy to support them.
For Zach and Shay, you two are obviously both so well known for huge, exciting action franchises, but you've also been really smart about mixing your work in with smaller, intimate projects as well. What would each of you say you were able to do in this film that maybe you weren't able to do in other things that you've worked on?
That's cool. Good question, Dave. I mean, I would just say that, working with Oliver was such an incredible experience for me, and I grew up as such an admirer of his work, and so, to work with in a really filmmaker-driven environment for me was part of the appeal, and then to have that filmmaker be him was all, even more of the appeal, and I think just to explore really socially relevant territory and something that is politically charged and resonant, and I think what Oliver said at the beginning is like, the people in this room and the people at this convention in so many ways are like the absolute core of the message of this film, I think. You just see all the phones up and like all the technological connections that you all have. This is your world, and to know what's going on in it, I think, is incredibly important, and the responsibility is yours. And so I think to be in a movie that reflects that back at the audience and really inspires you to get involved and be aware of what's happening is an exciting thing.
Shay? Oh.
Same for me. I mean, he put it so eloquently. Yeah.
I just wanted to say about Shailene that she wrote me a letter. I didn't know her, and she wrote me a letter filled with emotion, really coming off the page. And that's when I saw Fault in Our Stars, which I very much enjoy. Her performance in that movie is notable, and she moves the audience. It touches something in everyone, I think. And she came to this film, and she brought that abundance of emotion. I'm very grateful for it.
For Zach and Shay and Joe, would you say your politics have changed after making this movie, or did it basically solidify feelings that you already had?
Yeah, that second one.
Yeah. For me as well.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, seriously, go.
When Oliver first called me to invite me into this movie, I had heard the name Edward Snowden, but I knew very little about it, because in the middle of 2013, when he did what he did, I just happened to be very busy at that time, and I wasn't really following the news, and so it was an opportunity for me to look into it. And one of the things I find about political stories, or really almost about anything, when you take the time to look into it for more than 5 minutes, it always becomes complicated. And I think my notion before getting into the movie, before looking into it, was something simple. And it became much more complicated. That's one of the things I would really encourage anybody to do, is don't just take someone's word for it. This isn't a story that's as simple as a headline. It's not even a story that's as simple as a 2-hour feature film. It's complicated, and in fact, so much of what's going on these days is, and so much of our culture is all based on kind of tweet-length ideas. But you can't really communicate a lot of things in 140 characters. It's more complicated than that, and so in that way, I think my view on it really changed, having the opportunity to spend more time to really look into it.
Zach?
I agree with that. I was just fascinated once I really started to understand the scope of it. That was the thing that I mean, I echo that idea that like I knew what had happened, and the magnitude of it was reflected in corporate media and the coverage of the story when it happened, and so I thought I had a sense of it. But the complexity of it, the depth of it, the specifics of the information, like that was the thing that staggered me. I didn't feel like it changed my political standpoint at all. I feel like it galvanized my belief. And the former Attorney General Eric Holder recently publicly stated that he feels like Edward Snowden performed a public service, and I feel like that kind of thinking in the government is something that is really indicative of, I think, how important what he did was. And learning the details and getting into the complexity of it was the thing that this movie allowed me to do that I might not have done otherwise.
I wanted to footnote that. I do think we represent, maybe not to their satisfaction, but much of the government's position. We represent it in certain characters who speak in a certain way, defending this program. So we don't want to take sides on this in the movie. And I think you have to see the movie to understand the positions. Okay.
Well, given that this movie is coming out in a time where every day it feels like we see a new horrendous terrorist attack, there's one line in the movie that really made me sit up and take notice. And as I remember, it was a very intelligent government official, I think it was, who said, talking about terrorism's a short-term threat. And he goes on to say that the longer-term threats are China and Russia. And when that line was uttered, that's something that never crossed my mind that someone would even think that it's a short-term threat. Can you explain that mindset? Because it doesn't seem like it's a short-term threat right now.
Well, it's a composite character, Corbin O'Brien. We based him on the 1984 O'Brien to some degree, which always influenced me. Very smart man, played by Rhys.
Evans, right.
I'm sorry?
Rhys Evans.
Yeah, I never know how to pronounce that last name.
It's those Welsh names, they're very hard.
Did you say it?
I think it's Rhys Evans, Ifans.
Okay, Rhys is great in the movie, and he says, security is the new way to victory, and we've had this tremendous success since World War II, he says, in America, and prosperity, no great wars, and so forth and so on, and then he defends that we have to take into account all these threats, and he mentions cyber warfare as the main thing that's coming. Cyber warfare is very scary, for those of you who know this, and you've probably seen a lot of it in the movies already, apocalypse movies. It's really frightening, and he's most worried about that, and that's where Snowden was working at the end on the cyber front against the Chinese. So that's one of the things that justifies what they're doing, as well as he says at another point about the Iraq War, you don't have to love your politicians to be a patriot, which is another line of argument in the movie. And these things happen throughout. We have people who represent that point of view. And as a third class of people, it's the NSA people. Ed told us he feels that they're obviously going to hate the movie, but he thinks that it's a seed, and many people feel more in the middle than you think about what they're doing. And that's a very interesting point of view, that people can change over the course of a month, a year, 2 years. They'll come this way.
I think another interesting point that Glenn makes is that none of the surveillance in question has been proven to have stopped or prevented any terrorist attack that has happened since the evolution of this level of invasion of privacy, and I find that fascinating. That it's all done in the name of national security, and yet there is no greater measure of national security as a result of these particular programs that he exposed. So there's something to be considered in that.
Before I open it up to questions for you all, I want to do one last quick thing based off of the trailer that we all saw. There's 7 words that flash near the end of the trailer that have been used, all of them, to describe Edward Snowden. Many of them are factual. He was a soldier. We see that in the film. He is a fugitive. I want to ask you, the 4 of you, about 3 of those words in that trailer that are up for debate. And I want the 4 of you to raise your hand if you think these words actually apply to Edward Snowden. I have a feeling I know how this is going to go. But
remember that thing I was just saying about making things too simple? All right.
Let's
Just
for
keep
fun.
that in mind.
Patriot. Raise your hand if that applies to Edward Snowden.
I agree with you.
4 for 4. Traitor. 0 for 4. And finally, hero. 4 for 4. All right, questions from you all. Certainly you have some. Hello.
Thank you. This is to Oliver Stone. It's a little off topic, but I understand in the past you were trying to put together the movie, the Coca-Cola bombings, and I'm just curious what happened with that and if there felt any pressures like you didn't feel with this movie.
Excuse me, the Coca-Cola bombing?
Yeah, there was you met with Manuel Noriega, and there was perhaps that wasn't the title eventually, but there was something in Central America mid '80s that.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of dirt, but I don't
Right.
remember Coca-Cola, but that might be involved. But yes, I knew Manuel Noriega, got to know him. Fascinating story, wanted to tell it. Very complicated. That's one of those stories that is so complicated, sometimes it's better not to make it.
Sure. Okay.
He's still alive, and he's still looking for his sense of justice. And I think he's got an interesting case, very interesting case.
Okay, I guess a brief follow-up pertaining to Snowden. He pretty much just put out information regarding Project Echelon with newer stuff, with the smartphone technologies. Anything on that you'd care to elaborate on? Because that's been out there for a number of years.
I've heard the name, but Ed puts out a lot of good stuff. I can't keep up with all of it. It's in what's the name of it? In Intercept, Glenn's newspaper. You can follow it there or his tweets. But Echelon, I've heard it, but I can't give you detail.
All right, thank you.
Must be a horror show, though. Sounds like it.
Hello.
Hello. For Mr. Oliver Stone. Hello, everyone.
Oh, here comes.
And the question is, you've been working with film throughout your career, and this film was shot on digital. Did you need help learning the transition from film to digital, and how were you assisted in learning?
No, it's true. It was a completely new technique. But all the cameramen I've been working with have done both, and I had shot some commercials as well as several documentaries on digital. But film, I'd always loved the quality of film, but with the new development on the Alexas that I saw, and we shot in 65 some of this movie, 65 millimeter, and we were pretty free-ranging. I saw a new quality on digital. It's not quite the same as film, but it's good enough. It's good enough, and it makes there are a lot of things that are easier about it. At the same time, don't kid yourself. You're not going to save that much money because it does cost money for film purposes.
Hello.
You still have to build sets and costumes and backgrounds. You got to do the whole number, and you have to hire a crew that's basically a union-sized crew, and it needs it. Right?
Hi.
That's right.
Hey there. My question's for Oliver Stone. I was just wondering, you've made a couple controversial films now, and I was just wondering what draws you to that, what attracts you to those projects?
Believe me, I really didn't want to do this at the beginning. I thought very long and hard, and it took three meetings in Moscow with Ed to feel like I could do it. I had been too much. You get beat up when it's current, you get killed, lawsuits. Often what happens is even the protagonist of the story who's alive turns on the movie. There's all sorts of expectations. It's a very difficult thing, especially in rock music movies. I've had many issues with people and their families and so forth and so on. The egos are amazing. In this story, this story it's not over yet. We'll see when it comes out, but I am hopeful that it's been smooth, and I think the story works on dramatic terms, and people will understand. It speaks for itself. It doesn't need me to explain it.
People aren't asking you to make romantic comedies all the time? Studios don't want you to make a rom-com?
Studios don't want me to make anything. But maybe Shailene will give me a job on her next.
Hello.
How's it going?
Hey.
One of the big things people are talking about now as far as safety and security goes and surveillance is Pokemon Go. It's a thing in the news. People are saying they're running around with their cameras, mapping out where they live, where they're going, everything they're doing. Your thoughts?
I put something on Instagram the other day which I thought was going to be funny. And it was an interview from a junket that we gave in our London section of the press tour for Star Trek. And I was kind of railing against Pokemon Go as this thing that, separates us from each other. And everybody was like, but it doesn't. It actually connects us with each other and gets us out of our houses. And we're walking around and, connecting with each other. And then I was like, yeah, but like getting hit by cars because you're like looking at your screen. I guess like for me personally, and like no judgment attached to this whatsoever, I feel like people need to pursue what makes them happy. But what makes me happy is actually looking up from my screen and looking at somebody and like putting this thing down for at least some part of the day, and finding a connection that transcends the machines that are supposed to make us more connected. And I feel like as long as you can find a balance in that and limit your Pokemon Go time to like, then I'm all for it, have at it. I'm sure that this place is crawling with Pokemon Go's, right?
Yep. It's not really funny because it is what you're saying is on the money. What's happening, I'm hearing about it too, is this a new level of invasion where, once the government had been outed by Snowden, of course the corporations went into encryption because they had to for survival, right? But the search for profits is enormous here, enormous. I mean, nobody has ever seen in the history of the world something like Google, ever. It's the biggest, new, fastest growing business ever. And they have invested a huge amount of money into, as what surveillance is data mining. They're data mining every single person in this room for information as to what you're buying, what you like, above all, your behavior. So Pokemon Go kicks into that. But it's everywhere. It's what some people call surveillance capitalism. It's the newest stage where it's not for profit at the beginning, but it becomes for profit in the end because it creates its own awareness. And it gets into everywhere in the world until it manipulates our behavior and we start to act like that, which has happened already quite a bit on the internet. But you'll see a new form of, frankly, a robot society where they will know how you want to behave and they will make the mock-up that matches how you behave and lead you into another form of behavior. It's what they call totalitarianism.
Thank you for the question. You just made 6,500 people delete Pokemon Go off their phones. Hi.
Hi. Justice Morales, I heard that movie was. My question is specifically for Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but anyone can answer. How did your opinion Edward Snowden change after meeting him, prior to meeting him, and learning details that weren't in the books or newspaper, the headlines, and et cetera?
Well, what I really wanted to do was meet him because you can't always tell what someone's like just by watching interviews or watching documentaries. And, especially the truth is a lot of people that are as talented as he is in a sort of engineering capacity are sometimes hard to relate to personally, or I'm making generalizations here, and obviously this doesn't apply to everybody, but it's a stereotype is that they can be sort of egotistical, and I was half expecting it, to be honest. I was like, because I know guys like that are like super, super talented on the computer and kind of full of themselves, and I was really relieved to find that he's not like that. He was not like that at all. And that really influenced how I ended up going about playing him in the movie.
Great. Hello.
Hi. My name is Prism, and if you were wondering, the NSA didn't have to send me today because I'm going to be here anyways. But my question is...
Best costume at Comic-Con. Best costume at Comic-Con.
Scariest, but it's not really fictional.
Is that a Geordie visor? Is that what that is?
Well, it's a Google Glass. I mean,
okay.
Our first attempt to get people to wear these kind of failed because they made it look goofy, but they'll be around eventually, and we'll just tap in everybody's stream. So my question is, I'm sure each of you have someone in American history from the period of, say, the Declaration of Independence or the framing of the Constitution, and you may be familiar with how much effort they put in to limiting the power of the state over its citizens. I'm wondering what you would think your favorite or the person you most admire from that era would say if they came back today and could see the power that the government has over its citizens in the United States.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. I was playing Pokemon Go. Just kidding.
Well, I mean, there's so many things George Washington would say, but you know, the famous quote is from Ben Franklin, who said to a lady who asked him, "How do we going to create this democracy? How is it going to really work?" And he said, "If you can keep it, you'll make it a republic. If you can keep it." And you're right. The sovereignty of the individual has been completely overrun in this matter, and it's getting worse. So where does it end? We haven't kept it. We didn't do well by Franklin's promise. And I think we have a reckoning coming, because there's a lot of young people out there who, like these people, are pretty angry about this.
Is it also Ben Franklin? There's a quote, I think it's him, but I could be wrong, that says, those who would prioritize security over liberty deserve neither?
That's right.
Is that Franklin?
Yeah.
I like that. I like that quote. That's a good one.
So who's your favorite?
I would just, not one person in particular, but the Native Americans. When there were treaties established and promises made, and even still those treaties and those promises aren't being kept, I think they'd say, "I told you so."
Yeah, I find it difficult to narrow it down to a specific person as well, but I find the fascinating thing about this is the hand that technology has had, and I think anybody, you know, it's like the short amount of time that technology has advanced to the level that it's allowed for this level of infiltration is the thing that I just find fascinating in the looking at history and looking at how far we've come in such a short amount of time to the point where it's almost evolved beyond our capacity to keep it, to have control over it. And you know, that there's a vigilance that needs to be cultivated in our own awareness in order to try to steer it in some undamaging way moving forward. It's a good question.
Well, this movie comes out on September 16th, and I encourage you all to see it because it's going to make you think. And I thank all four of you for making us think today. So Oliver Stone, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Shailene Woodley, and Zachary Quinto. Thanks everybody. Have a great Comic-Con.